Are back again. We're reading Ribsy. We're on chapter 5. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for watching these. These are a lot of fun to share. When I was a kid, my parents would read to us at night. I had a lot of brothers and sisters, and we would all be in bed, and my parents would sit outside. My mom or my dad would sit outside the door of one of the bedrooms, and if your bedroom was downstairs, then you'd have to sleep there. We lived with my grandparents for a little while because we didn't have a lot of money, but my parents would try to read to us. And so I decided, since I have so much fun doing the book show and spending so much time editing and doing things like the crayons video or Dragons Love Tacos, those are some of my favorite videos, and I am sure you guys have some of your own that you love. But I thought, why don't I share some chapter books? Because it was just a fun thing as a kid to do that and to listen to the stories, and I remember them still. And that's why I'm sharing some of these. I apologize that some of these stories are from so long ago. This book was written and published in 1964, and so the world was a little bit different back then. And the way it's written was present tense at the time. So it doesn't explain a lot of things. Like a book that's older, like one that I want to read to you maybe later, is Sign of the Beaver. That's about a boy that lived back during the Revolutionary War. Back early in America, before America had the flag that it has. And a book like that explains a lot of things. But this book doesn't explain very much about the time period because they didn't know what was going to be different for us now. Beverly Cleary is the lady who wrote it, and I don't know that she really thought that people would still be reading it in 2025 or even later when you're listening to it. So I'm trying to tell you some of the things that are different from then, that are different from right now because you're little. And when you're little, you don't know what the world was like before you got here. But it's been changing a lot really quickly. When my grandpa was born back in 1908, they didn't have cars hardly, and he started working on cars. He really liked cars, but cars came, and then airplanes and trains and all kinds of cool stuff. And now we have computers, and we have this lovely object here, cameras that can put us in front of a whole bunch of people everywhere, and all that's different. So I like to share these things with you so that you can understand where you live in time, because it's different now than it ever has been, and that's pretty special. So to begin our story, let's just keep reading here. Ribsy goes to a football game. Do you see Ribsy? He's chasing under this guy with a football. You ever get a dog to run under your legs like that? It's a dangerous thing. We had a dog when I was little. Her name was Ginger, and she was a beagle. And beagles are kind of small dogs, but they run really fast. And this one, she didn't know her name. I don't think she knew she was the dog or that she was a person's dog. And so she would chase after us when we'd run, and she'd run our legs right out from under us, and we'd land on our backs and get the wind knocked out of you. And it was a really fun experience getting beat up by the dog all the time. She wasn't very big, but she could knock you down. Henry, I have an idea, said Mr. Huggins at breakfast one morning, about a week after he had discontinued the advertisement for Ribsy. Discontinued means he stopped the advertisement for Ribsy in the newspaper. This afternoon, I'll get off from work early, and we'll go down to the Humane Society and pick out another dog. Because Ribsy, we haven't read it yet, but Ribsy was a stray dog that Henry picked up. And so Henry says, I don't want another dog. I want Ribsy or nothing. Henry, be reasonable, said his mother. Ribsy has been gone almost a month. If we were going to find him, we would have found him by now. That's a really long time to be without your dog. I am being reasonable, said Henry. I just want my dog is all. He's got to be someplace. He'll come home as soon as he can make it. I know he will. Maybe somebody has him tied up and he's chewing on the rope right now. How would he feel when he made it home and found some other dog eating out of his dish? I don't know about that, Henry, said his father. Ribsy is no lassie. Lassie was a TV show. This is something that's different that I need to tell you. There might be Lassie shows that are remakes now. Lassie was a very popular show for a long time. It was about a collie. A collie is a dog that has kind of white and orange on it, sometimes dark colors too. But Lassie, I think, was just white and orange, and would go around and save kids who fell down wells and stuff by going to his owners and barking. They'd say, "What's wrong, boy? What is it?" And they'd follow Lassie, and Lassie would show him where the kid had fallen down the well, and he'd save him. It's a really popular TV show. That's why he says, he's no Lassie. He's just an ordinary city mutt. Maybe somebody has him fenced in and he's trying to dig his way out, said Henry, ignoring his father's critical remark. I bet that's what he's doing right this minute, digging under a fence. But Ribsy was not digging under a fence. Neither was he gnawing through a rope. He was trotting along the sidewalk, enjoying the fall sunshine. His ears were up, his eyes were bright, and his tail was waving. Ribsy was getting used to being lost. He was beginning to enjoy it. He met so many nice people, and not so nice as Henry Huggins, but nice just the same, except for sleeping in drafty garages and occasionally being forced to make a meal of fishy cat food. Ribsy found a lot to enjoy in the life he was leading. As Ribsy trotted along the sidewalk, he became aware of lines of cars bumper to bumper filling the street. Each car was jammed with yelling, shouting high school students, some of them waving pom-poms of crepe paper fastened to sticks. This was a stimulating sight to Ribsy, who felt that with so many noisy young people around, something interesting was bound to happen. "Zachary Taylor High School! Rah, rah, rah!" shouted one carload of students. Zachary Taylor was a president of the United States a long time ago. T-T-A-A-Y-Y-Y L-O-R-T-A-L-A-Y-L-O-R Taylor! They spell it all out. "Down with Taylor!" shouted another carload. "Hooray for Chester A. Arthur High School!" Chester A. Arthur, I believe, was also a president of the United States. You can look it up. If he wasn't that, it'll say what he was. Ribsy did not understand what it all meant, but it sounded like fun. He trotted faster, and soon he saw a mob of high school students crowding toward some narrow openings in an enormous gray concrete wall. Naturally, Ribsy had to investigate to see what all the excitement was about, and so he, too, joined the crowd. He wove his way through a forest of legs until he came to one of the gates, where a man was taking tickets. "Beat it, mutt," said the man in a most unfriendly way. Ribsy was not discouraged. He was a cheerful dog who knew there were many friendly people in the world. He wriggled his way through more legs until he came to another gate where another man was taking tickets. "No dogs allowed." This man gave Ribsy a shove with his foot. From inside the wall came the sound of many voices yelling. Something was going on that Ribsy should not miss. He tried a third gate. "You lost, Pooch," said the third ticket taker. Ribsy was still not discouraged. He simply sat down to wait for some change in the situation that would allow him to enter this strange place. The wait was not unpleasant because many people stooped to pet him while they stood in line with their tickets to await their turn at the gate. Among the crowd were several boys about Henry Huggins's age, but none of them was Henry. Gradually the crowd began to thin. A delicious smell floated across Ribsy's nose. He sniffed hungrily and swallowed. Hot dogs! There were hot dogs someplace inside this strange wall. Ribsy loves hot dogs. Do you have a dog? Does anyone know how much hot dogs are loved by dogs? I don't think there's a dog out there that doesn't like hot dogs. And that's why we call them hot dogs. No, it's not. I have to tell you, because I got to help to do something really interesting this morning. I went to a factory that my church owns where they make food for people who don't have food. And I got to help make the hot dogs today. I saw a machine that makes hot dogs. It was really big. It was as big as a car, and it had a big top on it, and they'd open it up, and it was really loud. You had to wear these earphones, And you had to wear a big, we dressed in all kinds, you had to put a smock on and a hairnet to keep your hair out. And I had to wear the beard net, goes over your mouth like this. It's just made out of like netting to keep your hair, like your beard hair could even fall out. And they don't want that in the hot dogs. So I was there and some other people, and we used big stainless steel shovels, like a big spoon, basically, because the whole room was a refrigerator. It was really cold. I wore wool socks, like when I go to the mountain to ski. I wore wool socks so it'd stay warm. And you had rubber gloves on, and you reach into this bin, a big, big bin, as big as a car, filled. One was filled with beef fat, and one was filled with beef trimmings, raw meat, and raw fat, and you would have to weigh it. And the recipe was on the wall. The recipe said 36.5 pounds of lean beef and 51 pounds of fat. And it had to have 3 fat like plastic bins filled with fat and 2 bins filled with the lean. And then a guy took them at the end of the rollers that we put them on to send them over to him, because we had like lots of bins that we were filling. And he'd pour them into this big machine that grinds it all up like a mixer on your mom's counter, except way bigger and way louder. And it would grind it all up, and he'd take a big bag of salt and seasoning and he'd dump it in there, and then it would go through, and then it got to the most interesting machine, the casing machine. Hot dogs are shaped, the way hot dogs are shaped. Well, all they have is a big long hose of that kind of casing material, and this machine twists them all really, really fast. You turn it on, and it starts spitting out hot dogs that are all connected to each other. And you take the hot dogs off of there, and some other guys would take those hot dogs and hang them up on these racks to go have them be cooked. Isn't that crazy? I never knew. I never got to see hot dogs get made in real life until this morning. And that was pretty neat. So, hot dogs. Here we are. Ribsy moved closer to the gate, wagged his tail, and fixed the gatekeeper with his most eager, pleading look as memories of home. We might even say, remember that word from the other chapter? Beseeching. He looked so beseechingly at this man. Please let me go in there. They have hot dogs. Pleading look as memories of home and hot dogs passed through his thoughts. Henry Huggins was fond of weenies. They used to call them weenies. We don't really call them that anymore, unless they're an Oscar Mayer wiener. And often ate one after school. Of course, he always gave one to his dog. Scram, said the gatekeeper, reaching for the ticket of a straggler. That's someone who's late to the game. Ribsy sat down and held up his left paw. This had worked before. It might work again. I see you're a southpaw, remarked the gatekeeper, who was more sociable now that he had no tickets to take. Well, offering to shake hands won't do you any good. You still can't come inside this stadium, Ribsy whimpered. No southpaw pooches allowed, said the man. Now beat it! Ribsy had no intention of leaving. Some ancestor of his had waited patiently at a rat hole. He would wait patiently at this gate. He lay down with his nose on his paws and waited. How cute. It was not easy to be patient. The sounds from inside told him he was missing something exciting. And those hot dogs smelled so good he could hardly stand it. This was one of the days he had been forced to eat cat food. He lay watching and waiting and thinking about hot dogs for what seemed like a long, long time. It was probably more like 2 minutes, but it was a long time to him. Inside, a band began to play and voices began to sing. Ribsy did not enjoy this as much as shouting, but even though music bothered his sensitive ears, he could appreciate the enthusiasm of the people. There was more yelling, and then a scream went up from the whole crowd. And a man's voice boomed out over a loudspeaker. Ribsy did not care at all for the loudspeaker, which hurt his ears, but did not hurt them enough to drive him away. Hunger, curiosity, and the desire to be in on the excitement held him to his vigil at the gate. A vigil is where you just stay in one place, waiting. A boy about Henry's age, wearing jeans patched on both knees and on the seat, appeared at the gate. "Hey, mister, can I go in?" he asked. "The game has started and the stadium isn't full." The man hesitated before he answered. "Sure, kid, go in." After that, the gatekeeper kept his eye on Ribsy, and Ribsy kept his eye on the gatekeeper. Inside, there was more screaming. Someone pounded a drum and someone rattled a cowbell. Ribsy closed his eyes. He would fool that man. He looked as if he was asleep, but he wasn't. He was letting his nose and ears tell him the man was still there guarding this gate. Isn't that cool? That a dog, when he closes his eyes, he can still tell you're there because he can smell you. If you left, you would know it because you would get fainter in smell. Doesn't mean you stink, just means he knows what you smell like, and he can smell you when you're close, and he can smell you when you're far, and he knows the difference. T-T-T-A-Y, shouted the students from Zachary Taylor High School. Y-Y-L-O-R! T-A-Y-L-O-R! Taylor! The man moved a few feet from the gate. He was so busy trying to see what was going on inside that he did not notice Ribsy flick one eye. After a few minutes, he glanced back at the dog, who was apparently sound asleep. Satisfied that the dog would not try to get into the stadium, the man moved farther inside and up the ramp that led to the grandstand seats. Ribsy's eyes opened a hair's breadth. A hair's breadth, as wide as a hair. Just that much, just where you can barely see through your eyelashes. Ribsy's eyes opened a hair's breadth and closed again. The man took a chance and moved even farther from his post. He wanted to see the game. After making sure the gatekeeper had his back turned, Ribsy sprang to his feet, dashed through the gate, and around the concrete wall that surrounded the field. Even if he had been wearing jingling license tags, he could not have been heard above the uproar inside. When he was a safe distance from the gatekeeper, he trotted up the ramp where he could see what was going on inside this strange and interesting place. What Ribsy saw inside the stadium was enough to excite any red-blooded dog. The sun was shining down on thousands of lively boys and girls, all of them jumping up and down and yelling, and many of them eating hot dogs. Below him lay an enormous field of grass. Nice, flat grass, just right for running. There wasn't a rock or burr or thistle on the whole field. Do you know what a thistle or a burr is? A burr will stick to your socks or your pant leg. And a thistle will do so as well, but they have little thorns that'll stab into your skin. They're not like a real thorn bush, but they still poke and they kind of hurt. And they hurt dogs' feet too. He looks at it and goes, "Oh, I could run on that field so well." There wasn't a rock or burr or thistle on the whole field, and on the grass were boys, quite a few boys, in football gear, running and tumbling all over one another. There were also men in striped shirts who appeared to be running after the boys. And that was not all. The boys had a football for chasing. A dog really could not ask for much more. Ribsy was delirious with the joy and excitement of it all. He longed to get down there on that grass to romp with the boys and chase that ball. He barked wildly. "Hey, look, a dog!" said a boy sitting on a bleacher near Ribsy. "Maybe we better get him out of here," said a second boy who was eating a hot dog. He's afraid that Ribsy will take his hot dog. "Aw, he can't hurt anything way up here," said the first boy, his eyes on the football game below. Ribsy looked at the hot dog and swallowed. The boy obligingly broke off a piece and dropped it on the concrete for Ribsy, who gobbled it up. It was the first food he had had in a long time that tasted like home. He wished he had more. For some strange reason, the two boys were now pounding one another on the back. "Boy, oh boy," one of them was saying, "a touchdown for Taylor Hi! Then he stuffed the last of his hot dog into his mouth. Ribsy lost interest in the boy after that and wandered up and down the steps that separated the rows of bleachers. He had never seen so many obliging people in one place before in all his life. All he had to do was sit down and stare at someone eating a hot dog, and a piece was almost sure to be broken off and dropped at his feet. At first, Ribsy gobbled up both the bun and the weenie, but in a little while he became choosy, rejecting the bun if it had mustard on it, and finally skipping the bun altogether and just swallowing the weenies. With familiar food in his stomach and so many kind people around him, Ribsy was happy. He began to look for a way to get in on the excitement below. He trotted along the wall that rimmed the field, and when the cheering was especially loud, he put his paws up on the edge of the wall and barked. He was barking from sheer excitement and also because he saw below him some boys about Henry's age who were standing on the edge of the field, trying to look important. "Look!" squealed a girl. "A dog cheering for Taylor High!" "Isn't he darling?" said another girl. "Look at his cute collar trimmed with rhinestones. Maybe we should make him our mascot." A boy said, "Somebody better get him out of here. A dog can wreck a football game." But the game was so exciting, with the score 7-6 in favor of Zachary Taylor High, that no one wanted to take his eyes off of the players long enough to remove a dog from the stadium. One team grabbed the ball and raced toward one end of the field. Before the boy who carried the ball was able to cross the line for a touchdown, the other team managed to capture the ball and went racing off to the opposite end of the field. The game was so close that no one was paying attention to Ribsy. He was free to explore the stadium. Oh no. One team made a touchdown, and then the other team made a touchdown. Finally, down at the end under the scoreboard, Ribsy found a ramp that led through a sort of tunnel that opened on that nice green grass. "We want a touchdown! We want a touchdown!" the crowd was chanting, since all the boys Ribsy had ever known who tumbled around on grass were glad to have a dog romp with them. Ribsy ran out on the field confident that he was welcome. The grass was so cool to his paws and so fragrant to his nose that he had to stop for a good roll. With his 4 feet in the air, he squirmed and wriggled. It was bliss. Only the fun of chasing a ball made him stop. The quarterback from Chester A. Arthur High School had the ball and was running down the field toward the end zone with the Zachary Taylor team after him. The boys and girls in the grandstand were a screaming, yelling mob. The hands on the clock on the scoreboard showed that only seconds were left to play, and those seconds were passing quickly. Naturally, Ribsy wanted to chase after the fastest runner, the boy who was carrying the ball. He raced down the edge of the field, avoiding the younger boys, who, to his delight, had begun to chase him. A newspaper photographer, anxious to photograph the moment that would decide the game, ran along the side of the field with the boys chasing Ribsy. To Ribsy, this was all part of the fun. "Come on, Arthur!" screamed half the mob who attended Chester A. Arthur High School. "Tackle him! Tackle him!" screamed the other half who attended the Zachary Taylor High School. This was the most fun Ribsy had enjoyed since the boys and girls had chased him around the schoolyard with a lunch bag in his mouth. He eluded the younger boys who were chasing him along the side of the field. When he was opposite the quarterback who was carrying the ball, he put on a burst of speed and darted onto the field in front of the player. Ribsy hoped he would drop the ball so he could have a turn chasing it. The Arthur High School quarterback was so busy trying to stay ahead of a player who was about to dive at his knees that he did not see the dog. Just before he would have crossed the line in for a touchdown, he tripped over Ribsy, fell flat on his face, and dropped the ball, which was snatched up by a player from the Taylor High School team. Flash bulbs popped. Flash bulbs, back then, if you took a picture, you had to have a special bulb, and it could only be used once, and it would turn on and go and then die off real fast, and that was their flash. And that's what he means by flash bulbs popped, because they will pop, 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 kind of like firecrackers. The last second ticked off the clock on the scoreboard. The referee blew his whistle. The crowd went wild. Drums boomed. Cowbells rattled. The game was over. Thanks to Ribsy, Zachary Taylor High School had won 13-12. To Ribsy's surprise, he found himself tackled not by a football player, but by a boy about Henry's age. The knees of his jeans were patched, and his hair had not been cut for some time. "Gotcha!" said the boy, hanging on tight. It was all a game to Ribsy. "That your dog?" asked the photographer. The boy saw a chance to be important for a few minutes. "Sure," he said. "Sure, he's my dog." Ribsy stopped struggling because he needed to pant. He let his tongue hang out of his mouth while he tried to catch his breath. "What's his name?" inquired the photographer, pulling out a pencil and paper. "Junior," answered the boy promptly. It was the first name that popped into his head, and the reason it popped into his head was that Junior was his own nickname. It was a nickname he did not like one bit. "Junior," the man wrote it down. "That's a funny name for a dog." "He was named after his father," the boy answered quickly. "What's your name?" asked the photographer. "Joe Sailor," answered the boy, leaving off the junior on purpose. "Address?" Joe told where he lived, a street half a mile from the stadium. By now, the Zachary Taylor High School students were swarming around Joe Sailor to pet the dog that had helped to win the game. Under the circumstances, Joe was not going to put Ribsy down, not when everyone thought it was his dog who was the hero of the game. It began to seem to Joe that Ribsy really was his dog. As for Ribsy, he was enjoying the attention he was getting, and after all, Joe was a boy. Ribsy liked boys. It's not that he didn't like girls, it's just that the last time he was around some girls, they washed him with that terrible smelling stuff, and he couldn't get rid of that weird smell of, what kind of flowers was that? I forget what kind of flowers it was, but it was really, really a steep scent, and he didn't care for it. Nothing against girls. Girls are wonderful. Joe carried Ribsy off the field. Every time he was about to put Ribsy down, someone said, "That's the dog that saved the game!" Boys were satisfied to pet Ribsy, but girls were inclined to squeal and say, "Isn't he darling?" Some of them hugged him, and one girl went so far as to kiss him. Both Joe and Ribsy were having a good time. It was not until the crowd had thinned out that Joe released Ribsy. Joe then went up into the grandstand. Not having anything better to do, Ribsy tagged along. Joe walked along between rows of seats looking for something, and Ribsy walked along too. Joe picked up a nickel and a penny, and several rows farther up the stadium, he found a dime. Someone's hot dog change had been dropped and had rolled away during the excitement of the game. Ribsy examined wads of waxed paper that had been wrapped around the hot dogs. It was getting dark before Joe found another nickel, and by that time the stadium was almost empty. Who do you think Joe is? Is he looking for money because he doesn't have enough? "Only 21 cents, Joe remarked to Ribsy. "I do better at college games." When Joe left the stadium, Ribsy followed. It seemed almost like old times when he used to follow Henry. "Where are you going?" Joe asked Ribsy. Then he bent to examine the dog's collar under a streetlight. There was no license tag. Joe shrugged and started toward home. One of his shoes was untied, and his shoelace flopped as he walked. Ribsy did not have any place to go, so he went along too. When Joe came to an old house with a sagging porch and peeling paint, Ribsy followed him around to the back and right up the steps. Inside, someone was practicing on a piano. Plink, plunk, plunk, over and over. Joe groaned. "Mom's making Darlene practice," he muttered. Ribsy looked expectantly at the door, which he was sure would be opened for him. A boy like Joe would not leave a dog out on a porch now that it was supper time. "Don't you have any place to go?" Joe asked Ribsy. Ribsy's answer to this was a short, eager bark. Turned out that Ribsy was right about Joe. The boy bent over and took off the red rhinestone trimmed collar that old Mrs. Frawley had given Ribsy. He stuffed it into his pocket and said, "That's a sissy collar for a dog like you." Then he opened the door and said, "Come on in." Ribsy stepped onto the worn linoleum of the kitchen floor, and Joe closed the door behind him. That's the end of chapter 5. this is the picture of the next chapter. Look, it's a picture from the game. And the title of the next chapter is The Famous Dog. I think that Henry Huggins is going to find out where his dog went. Come back tomorrow and we'll read the last chapter of Ribsy. I'm excited. Ribsy, I think, is going to finally get home. If you liked this, please subscribe and please hit the like button. There's a button called the like button, and if you hit it, people will go, oh, that's a good one. We'll watch that video. So here's Ribsy scratching his ear. He'd be so happy to get home. Okay, we'll talk to you later.